It's 9:45 a.m. We've just finished our second break. Welcome back. This is the 3D MBD track for 2021 GPDIS Global Product Data Interoperability Summit. Our next speaker is Matthew Carter. Oh, sorry. Our next speaker is Garrett Thurston. He's the Senior Director of Transformation from Dassault Systemes. He'll be talking about transformation value-driven architecture. Garrett, do you want to share your webcam now?
Sure.
Okay, we've got your webcam, I can hear your voice, and we can see your presentation. Go ahead.
Super. Thanks so much for allowing us to present here today. I realize this is an MBD session and we're talking about transformation. Hopefully that won't be too offensive to folks on the line. So it's such a brief time that we have today. The scope of what we're going to talk about is really focused on value, and we're going to talk a little bit about the analogy to wind tunnel testing, and hopefully that's something that folks are familiar with. And a lot of times when we kick off transformation, there's a lot of visions and goals and objectives, and one of the things that sometimes gets overlooked is using values as a means to afford decision making and as a means to establish measures as we go through a transformation process, so we understand if we have the right leading indicators and to be able to afford decision making during transformation, which is relatively important. It is narrow scope. Normally, if we were going to talk about this, we would be diving into what the transformation context and business architecture were. However, in this relatively short presentation, we're going to focus right in on the value aspects, and certainly you can contact any one of the three of us if we want to dive in deeper to these other areas. Okay. I've had the good opportunity to work in developing these concepts with David Haberman and Matt Carter. It's been relatively enjoyable to be able to collaborate with folks who bring complementary views and experiences and knowledge and expertise to make the different concepts that we have to elaborate on much more rich than they would have been, had any one of us had to do this all alone. So it's been an enjoyable effort. This was one of the statements that was made during the 2019 GPDIS keynote presentation. It kind of makes you think, or it makes me think of a couple of different things. One is, if there's such a large propensity for failure, why try? And in Clay Christensen's series of books that includes Seeing What's Next, the need to transform is tied to competitiveness, market position, and eventually it can be in existential concerns. Failing to transform leads to ultimately to a failure to continue to exist. And so that's why we have to continue to try. The second question is, how do we look at this as an opportunity for learning? How do we increase our chances for success in transformation? How do we understand the problem of transformation and deliver the business promise in the time frame of relevance? What also can be done is there's a rich set of materials that involve why not just transformation, but why strategies succeed and fail. And so there's a reasonable set of assets to dive into to elicit opportunities for decreasing that failure rate or increasing that success rate. Here, when we start to look at the nature of transformation, it's what we call a wicked problem, right? And wicked problems have several characteristics. And so what we want to do when we start to apply thought processes and techniques and methods to be able to improve our opportunity for success for transformation, we really need to understand the nature of the problem. If we start to apply methods around tame problems or complicated problems or complex problems, we may not have all the tools in place to be able to tackle the wicked problems. And so by understanding that characteristic, we actually can then take and improve, streamline, systemize the transformation, and use roadmaps and plans and the ability to measure and adapt to help to improve the transformation outcomes. One concept that we want to talk about here today is that we want to be able to look at what the transformation environment is and how do we anticipate successful outcomes by using a wind tunnel analogy. And so that wind tunnel analogy allows us to take scaled models or concepts and be able to stress them just like you would an aircraft or engine, and then be able to look at whether or not we can anticipate successful future outcomes. And so it's a powerful concept that ideally folks can understand that and use as a future evaluation and assessment analogy, using value concepts and scenarios as stimulus in a standard environment that allows us to communicate across the enterprise and be able to understand, where we might offer opportunities for improvement. So this basic concept model is a means by which we can understand the business needs elicitation for future architecture synthesis, right? So we're trying to synthesize on this side of the concept model, where it's related to the need and the business capability, the set of requirements and goals that we're trying to achieve in the context of different constraints and operating contexts. And then on the other side is the wind tunnel concept, where we're actually using those basic value scenarios as a means by which we can evaluate and assess that architecture. And so this kind of ties those concepts together. So focusing in, if we look at the overall topology, we have sort of the concept of a standard value model. And the idea here is to be able to elicit the right transformation values that are coherent for driving strategic business capabilities, maturities in the direction of the envisioned future operating state, and to be able to establish future operating value targets. And this is key in making sure that we've got those identified key values and operating patterns so that we have the basis for wind tunneling what our architecture and implementations are doing as we're going through that transformation process. So this is a conceptual view that containing the time evolution of three important elements of that value concept model. So there's the maximum potential value that's represented here, where when we achieve full maturity, when we have the associated enterprise values involving the operational characteristics and patterns have been satisfied, we achieve conceptually a full maturity maximum potential value to the enterprise that the transformation delivers. In the process of moving from state A to state B, we have an incremental maturity that is occurring as we go across this conceptual maturity line, and that gives us something called acquired value in the context of that maturity. And then as that acquired value is able to be deployed, we can move towards early adopters, looking at how adoption is done across the enterprise and gradually converging on that maximum acquired value. And those early adopters come in different forms. A common set would be a program or an organization. Different enabling capabilities can be adopted maybe more broadly a little bit earlier as well, not just at an organizational program concept level. So the color is conforming to the lines that you had on the previous chart. And so what the important thing to realize here is, as we start to look at the operational patterns that are in alignment with the transformation aspects, it allows us to establish that upper bound on what the total achievable or maximum potential value is. and that allows us to be able to look across the enterprise capability topology and be able to use those patterns as a means to establish that upper bound. As we do the maturity ratings against the capabilities, the strategic business capabilities, this provides us a means where we can understand both opportunities for improved maturity, as well as being able to check off the burn down list, if you will, for areas that need to be worked. And it allows that acquired value potential to be driven into the business with the early adopters, and then eventually as it gets deployed out to the enterprise. So the idea here is that when we start to look at the classes, as we decompose the different elements of transformation, they fall into something that's relatively holistic, right? Sometimes we end up with organizations that might focus on the particular aspects with technical readiness, but we look at it as other foundations of value, which include digital connectedness, organizational readiness, operational readiness, and deployment readiness. And the aspects, like for example, with operational readiness, is how ready are the business operations as a part of that transformation to be able to employ that. And as they become ready, what kind of changes in education need to take place before you get into training. So if there are digital and model-based aspects to what you're trying to achieve as a part of your transformation, as with the digital modernization program for DoD or the digital engineering strategy for DoD that supports the national defense strategy, those aspects need to be baked into what that operational readiness education are before you start to deploy something that is for learning and development for organizational readiness. So, and deployment readiness increasingly is the ability to deliver different configurations of the product more rapidly in time, or the enabling product in time, so that you can achieve that increased value appreciation as you're going about that maturity element. So in terms of the virtual wind tunneling transformation aspects related to the operational patterns, so these discrete patterns we formulated, related very much to decision-making aspects that allows us for rapid kitting or materiel preparation, ability to look at that digital and model-based information, conduct analysis in support of what that decision facilitation and automation is, and then what that action implementation is, right? A lot of times we think about making the decision, but from that decision point to the point in which it's implemented in the enterprise, how long does that take, and driving that latency out? And what we try to reflect here is that we start up at this upper left-hand corner as sort of rudimentary and perfunctory, but as we go diagonally across these values, we're increasingly becoming industrially robust, operational dominance being achieved as we've matured all these different areas. And ultimately, the intent is to be able to achieve top-line competitive differentiation, so that over here we may be achieving bottom line effectiveness, efficiency, and speed. Over here we're differentiating ourselves so that we can open up our top line and achieve better revenue numbers in that enterprise impact section. So ultimately the concept here is to use value, which is I've heard in a number of the talks throughout the week, the concept of value, but to really decompose that value into its constitutive elements, where the enterprise creates value, where it delivers value to its customers, and where it captures value. And by focusing on these different value elements, it allows us to be able to wind tunnel test that evolving transformation architecture. And ultimately, some of the key takeaways are to promote rich evaluation of future enterprise operating model, drive and enable multi-perspective and broad enterprise stakeholder engagement, provide a common connection and language into the business, bridging strategic, transformational, and operational elements, supports scenario-based future state analysis, in continuous improvement and refinement, and robustly supports and captures strategic roadmaps and planning to support execution. So in the subsequent slides, feel free to reach out to any of the three of us. And we did put in a set of key terms and some of the different resources that we used over the last several months in pulling this together. So that concludes the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Just looking for questions. I don't see any at this point.
Well, in the audience's defense, it was a model-based definition session.
I've got one here. Let's see. Who does the evaluation and maturity assessment?
So the evaluation assessment has multiple contexts and collaborators. So because it's a total value concept, you need to understand the total value against strategic and tactical elements. So programs have a vested interest, but the enterprise has a vested interest, and so that evaluation component has to be at multiple levels with multiple collaborators in order to ensure that we get a balanced view of what the achievement is. And in terms of the maturity assessment is done typically using the SMEs with the expertise to make the determinations in those different value classes. So the digital folks are more architecture centric. The technical folks are the SMEs that are related directly to the operational elements. And then the learning and development, of course, is related to the OCM folks, and the operational aspects, again, are very closely related to the SMEs, whereas the deployability is related to the DevOps teams. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you. Another question. What is the difference between technical and digital readiness?
So technical readiness is effectively the ability to enable, facilitate, and automate the technical tasks or meet the technical functions that are related to the technical tasks that are needed by the business, by the services of whatever infrastructure, applications, or tools that you're leveraging. And so that's the ability to satisfy those functional and non-functional needs or operational needs of the business. Whereas digital, in the current context, digital is the ability to connect discrete elements that are across the business, and that may involve information elements or resource elements that provide work structure elements that provide the digital engineering enablement associated with the enterprise execution, and so that as well as the configuration management thereof. So hopefully that helps to clarify the difference.
All right, we've got 2 or 3 more questions, but we're really up against the wall here. You got a 1-minute answer to what are some of the key Mbse tools your team uses?
So we rely pretty heavily on expressing architecture descriptions and rationale, as well as specifications in the Cameo tool suite that we acquired back in 2017, along with the No Magic competencies, capabilities, personnel, etc. And so there's a heavy dependence and reliance on that for eliciting those architectures.
All right, and we can maybe squeeze in one more. We got a 30-second answer to what are the biggest challenges to validate, standardize a value ratings matrix?
So value is tricky, as we all know, and the ability to agree between stakeholders on value is actually at the core of value, and so that's that's one of the challenges, is making sure that once you have that agreement, that it evolves in a deliberate way, but it doesn't get, you know, tossed out as, you know, out of expediency. So hopefully that is short enough.
All right, thank you. That are we at the time limit?
Looks like it.
I believe we are, yes.
Kenny
All right,
had
well,
one question in the chat if you want to ask that question before we end.
All right, one last question. With such a diverse group of stakeholders that need to engage in this process, what are the most significant roadblocks to achieving transformation value?
That'd be tough to say the most significant, but I think that past operating models have a very strong equilibrium and attraction to folks that are operating every day in delivering, you know, weapon systems and aerospace aircraft and satellites. And so those past patterns and equilibriums pull folks back into that mindset and behavior. And so I would say that, you know, OCM is probably way underestimated in terms of what the investment needs to be to help folks beyond those patterns of behavior and mindsets to move into a transformation context. So there's a lot available, including the sources that we have quoted here.
All right, thank you.